So Adam Schefter is here with the latest. Adam, let's start with Sam Darnold. What's going on with him?
Laura, the Minnesota Vikings officially did not use their franchise nor transition tag on Sam Darnold, which means he now has an unimpeded path to free agency if that's what he wants. The Vikings would like him back in Minnesota, but not at the franchise number. The two sides will talk to see if they can figure out a deal, though Darnold could have other options with other teams as well. We'll see how that works out. The Cincinnati Bengals did use their franchise tag on T. Higgins, and he now is essentially tied to Cincinnati, though the Bengals would like to get a long-term deal worked out with T. Higgins. We'll see whether or not they can get that done. The idea of tagging and trading could pop up. We'll see how the Bengals decide to act on that. And before the Cowboys could use their franchise tag on Osa Odigizua, they signed him to a 4-year, $80 million deal that included a $40 million signing bonus and up to $58 million in guaranteed money. Very un-Cowboy-like to act ahead of things and get out in front of the market, but Dallas learned something from last year and is moving quicker than it did at this time last year. And the big move today came from the Philadelphia Eagles, who once again have signed Saquon Barkley to a 2-year contract extension in the same calendar year that they signed him to a 3-year deal. It makes Barkley the highest paid running back in NFL history, a 2-year, $41.2 million deal. There's incentives, there's escalators, there's upside in there. And this deal that makes Barkley the highest paid running back in NFL history caps an incredible calendar year for Saquon Barkley, in which he went to Philadelphia, rushed for 2,000 yards, became the Offensive Player of the Year, and of course helped lead the Philadelphia Eagles to a Super Bowl title.
All right, more on that in moments as we welcome you into the show officially. So glad that you're with us today. Tim Passelbeck, Sam Acho, Adam Schefter, of course, with us for the hour. A lot of news to get to. Let's show you what Saquon posted just moments ago. Overflow, grateful for the Eagles organization, grateful for my team, grateful for the amazing fans in Philly. Fly, Eagles, fly. Tim, what do you think of the Eagles' investment in Saquon?
Well, look, he's a remarkable player. He did an amazing job this year in a passing league. He basically was dominant, especially in the postseason with the ball on the ground, which, you just don't typically see anymore. And I will just say, Adam kind of, jokingly made the comment about, the Cowboys, finally being ahead of things in terms of doing a deal for somebody that they know to pay him and trying to assess what the market might be. Look, the Eagles just said, this is an unbelievable player, somebody that changes the way we play on Sundays. Let's reward him, make sure he's happy, and keep him here and be ahead of the game on it, which they've clearly done.
Yeah, it's going to change the way that teams try to defend Philly for the long term. Think about it. The Philadelphia Eagles last year led the NFL in rushing attempts. They were the number one rushing offense. And so now all of a sudden, to your point, Tim, in a passing league, you're going run first with Saquon Barkley. You're going run first with some of the offensive line. You're going run first even with the quarterback run game. And so for me, this speaks to the point of defense wins championship games as well as the running game. And so sometimes it seems as if the Philadelphia Eagles, at least last year, were yinning when other teams were yanking, going one way, other teams going the other, and it paid off big time for Saquon and the Eagles.
Yeah, I'll just continue to shout out Howie Roseman and this Eagles organization with the way that they handle their players, the way that they reward them for good play. It really has worked out well for them. And Adam, to Acho's point, we've seen quite an evolution for running back value over the last couple of years. Where do you think this could lead next?
Listen, I think for the first time we've begun to see running backs be paid. And I think the value of running backs has begun to be reestablished in the draft, where we've seen running backs now get drafted higher than they have in other years. Remember, there were some years where we didn't see running backs go high, and all of a sudden, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs go in the same draft. We're seeing running backs go higher. This may be the finest running back draft class that we've seen in recent memory, and eventually, all these outstanding young running backs are going to be paid. And Saquon Barkley today is help paving the way for other running backs in the future, creating a new benchmark by which they will try to achieve in the future. With the cap going up, it makes it easier to do. And now we're starting to see very gradually running backs achieve some of the value in their contracts, but you're also starting to see it in the draft, which later on will equate to deals in free agency.
Yeah, I'm not saying Ashton Genty is Saquon Barkley, but it just makes me think, talking to him at the Combine, how much he talked about Saquon. And Saquon's deal includes $36 million fully guaranteed at signing. That's nearly $10 million more guaranteed than any other running back has in a deal. More on that later, but let's get back to our other top story. The deadline to franchise tag players just passing as we started our show, and no tag for Sam Darnold for the Vikings. Darnold coming off a career year and will only be 28 years old next season. He ranked 14th in total QBR last season. Almost all of the players who performed similarly were making at least $40 million per year. He performed better than both Tua and Trevor Lawrence last season, who were both making over $50 million per year. Tim, did the Vikings make a mistake not tagging Sam Darnold?
No, probably not, because they're, saying that, J.J. McCarthy is going to be their quarterback of the future. So they're going in that direction. So, paying a guy a bunch of money that you're not planning on, playing is not a mistake. But I would just say, from the perspective of, you have somebody in your building that you could probably, presumably get a deal with that can play. You don't know that J.J. McCarthy can play. You think that he can play. And so I just think that in this world where we see guys, bust, in the first round at the quarterback position all the time, that he can do it. And so, look, I would have felt comfortable at his age, just 27 years old right now, to do a long-term deal and build around Sam Darnold. Like, I would have been comfortable doing that. It's clearly not the direction they want to go. And if I were Sam Darnold, my emphasis now would be, look, Minnesota has said J.J. McCarthy is going to be the guy of the future. So you're a dead man walking, playing the position in Minnesota. So finding another opportunity is probably the best course of action for Sam Darnold at this point.
And moving on from Sam Darnold is likely the best course of action for the Minnesota Vikings. You made the point that you don't know what you have in J.J. McCarthy, but you would never know if you don't give J.J. McCarthy a top 10 pick, an opportunity to go and show you what he can do. They drafted him top 10 for a reason. There was excitement. There was buzz. And to your point, he is unproven, quote unquote. I mean, take out the quotes and unquotes. He is unproven. But the fact is, you invested a lot of draft capital in him, and you want to see what he can do. And so Sam Darnold earned himself a huge payday. And it wouldn't be wise, just to your point, Tim, of staying in Minnesota when you know that, number one, other teams who are more quarterback needy and quarterback desperate will pay you more. And number two, even if you do sign in Minnesota on a long-term deal, there's a top 10 pick who's right behind you waiting for you to make a mistake. And so I think it's the right decision for Minnesota. I think the best decision for Sam Darnold moving forward is not to entertain contract talks with Minnesota, but to go and test free agency.
Look, this is all about value. And the Vikings ultimately decided that they did not believe, with all the holes that they had to fill, that Sam Darnold was worth the franchise tag of over $40 million a year. They still would like to bring him back, and we'll see whether the two sides can work out a deal. But here's the interesting part of them not tagging Sam Darnold. Now that he's not tagged, you have to wonder if any quarterback needy team out there now will take a closer, harder, stronger look at a player like Sam Darnold, knowing that they can sign him without having to give the Vikings compensation. And so even though Sam Darnold's market may have seemingly been flat in recent weeks, now we're in a situation officially where another team doesn't have to give up anything to get him. And now you have to wait to see whether that forces any team with a quarterback need, whether that's the Giants or the Raiders or a team we don't see coming, to reestablish the value of Sam Darnold and to decide to pursue him more aggressively than they thought they would up until now.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. The Giants, the Raiders, the Titans, the Browns, the Indianapolis Colts, like it will change when you don't have to give up compensation because he's been tagged. And I would just say this, people kind of look at this with Sam Darnold. When he was drafted, he wasn't even 21 years old. Made his first start in the NFL at 21. He is a young player that played through some adversity. And, this idea that, hey, Kevin O'Connell's just going to make it right. Like, like, we can't skip over the Josh Dobbs, Jaron Hall era in Minnesota. Like, it didn't go Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold. Like, that's not the path that it went. There are guys that fail at playing the position all the time. The guy proved that he can play at a high level, and I think it's important always to keep that into consideration.
Yeah, and you guys alluded to this, but I do think it's worth reminding people. It's not that the Vikings don't like Sam Darnold. In fact, in talking to Kevin O'Connell, Josh McCown at the Combine, they love this guy. They love what they got out of him. They developed a really personal relationship with him as well, but it is a business, so we'll keep an eye on these other teams that, to Adam's point, now don't have as high of a price to pay to get him. There's a lot of teams that need a quarterback, too. All right, to more news. Adam, the Jets are making moves at wide receiver. What can you tell us there?
Well, they are officially moving on from Davante Adams, to the surprise of nobody. There was not anybody that was going to be trading for that contract the way it was constituted. And so they are releasing Davante Adams, allowing him to become a free agent just months after they traded for him. And now Davante Adams will go into the pool of free agent receivers. Won't have to wait, can sign with anybody starting tomorrow. Doesn't have to wait until next week because he's being released by the New York Jets. And again, we'll see what team decides that Davante Adams is worthy of a prominent spot on their roster. Davante Adams, I would imagine, would be looking for a place that he can win games, have a good quarterback, have some of the ingredients that have been missing in recent years, whether he played in Las Vegas or in New York.
All right, we'll see if he keeps an eye on where Aaron Rodgers goes. I don't know if they're still interested in keeping that going, but either way, both of them looking for potential new spots. We're just getting started on NFL Live. The Cowboys signed Osa Odighizuwa to a big deal, as Adam told you about, but the offense still has some major concerns. Coming up next, you'll see it in a moment. Tim is going to tell us why Dallas should look to the draft to fill the position player to be tagged in consecutive seasons since the tag was implemented in 1993. The last two, Chris Godwin and Dak Prescott, both agreed to long-term deals before playing on the tag for a second season. Le'Veon Bell, of course, set out the entire 2018 season, while Kirk Cousins remains the only player to play under the tag twice. Right, so Acho, was this a big mistake by the Bengals to invest this much in Higgins, knowing who else remains that they still have to get signed on that team?
No, it was the right decision by the Cincinnati Bengals to put a franchise tag on T. Higgins in order to work out a long-term deal. But that decision comes with collateral damage. We just saw that they released Alex Kappa, their starting guard, who came in a couple years ago to help protect Joe Burrow. Now all of a sudden, you have T. Higgins. You're going to sign Jamar Chase to a long-term deal, but you still have to be wary about the issues of the offensive line. And so in order to create cap space for one thing, you want to create a new problem. And so, yes, right decision. Keep your quarterback happy. You have one of your star receivers, but now you have to go and restock and reload that offensive line to keep Joe Burrow protected so you don't recreate a problem that you had from a few years back where Joe Burrow was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL.
So this is a team that's got a number of financial questions to face this offseason. We know that Jamar Chase wants to be the highest paid player, non-quarterback in football. He's going to become the highest paid wide receiver in football history, to the tune of about $40+ million per year on average. We know that T. Higgins is looking for a deal upwards of $30 million per year. They don't seem particularly close on either deal right now, but there's going to be, in Cincinnati's perfect world, a lot of money donated or dedicated to the wide receiver position. That doesn't even include Trey Hendrickson, who led the NFL in sacks last year. He wants a new deal. We know they have to upgrade the defense somehow. That's not going to be easy to do. And so this is a team that's navigating any number of financial issues, with Joe Burrow paying close attention, having sent very many signals in recent weeks that he's waiting and wanting Cincinnati to re-sign these players.
So I'm just trying to figure this out. So if Higgins is going to be at, 30+ million and Chase is going to be at 40 million, so there's 70 there, and Burrow's at 50, so you got $120 million a year for three players. Like,
good math, Tim.
Listen, this is why you can't. Thank you. I've worked hard. Okay, listen, you can't do it, and that's why you don't do it, and they're all happening at the same time. So that's why, the wait and see game, when you know somebody can play, extend the guy, do the deal, rather than kicking it down the road and then thinking that you're going to tag him. And if you've drafted well, like the guys that were drafted behind him, like they're going to be up for new deals. Like to me, it's actually just kind of, look, we can call it cheap. I guess I'd prefer to just say it's kind of irresponsible in terms of how you're managing the talent that you draft. And much like we talked about, things that they've done in Dallas, it's a very similar thing. They've actually drafted well in Dallas, but when you draft well, you better be quick to re-sign those guys that can play. If you don't, it ends up being more expensive, and then quite honestly, you end up losing them, having to let them walk. It's just, you create a mess by doing it. They've kind of created a horrendous situation with three of their best and most important players all kind of, being due to be paid around the same time.
And I think the only real issue that I would say as far as the mess that's been created, quote unquote, is the fact that it's really Joe Burrow that wants to make sure that the band stays together. Joe Burrow has made it very clear that he wants Jamar Chase to not only stay on the team, be the highest paid receiver, and also to have T. Higgins still be on the team. We've seen other teams that have let star players go and drafted people to replace them, no matter what the quarterback says, thinks, or feels. But in this situation, it seems as if the team, meaning the Bengals, are accommodating to their star quarterback, which I believe is the right decision. And so, yes, you have over $170 million allocated to some of your star players, but also this is the biggest jump in the salary cap that we've seen. And so there is more cash available, but you have to just be wise and delegate how that money is spent, especially when it comes to not only free agency, but also now rebuilding those holes through the draft.
Yeah, and I think that it makes sense to involve your quarterback, your biggest investment from a player perspective, and say, all right, but you got to make a choice. Like you can't have T. Higgins and have Jamar Chase, have them be paid at the top of the market. Because, oh, by the way, we do need to sign linemen. We do need to address things on the defensive side of the ball because, the guy that helps you get the ball back, Trey Hendrickson, he's due to get paid as well. And so, look, it's important to have guys, voice their opinion on how they feel about certain players. But at some point, you have to say, look, we can't pay everybody. And I would also say this, it's not Joe Burrow's job to essentially give money back. That's the team's job to make sure that they're managing the money properly.
And all these questions are why there are other teams wondering if the Bengals will wind up entertaining offers for T. Higgins. Especially last year, he requested a trade, didn't get one. What if he requests a trade again this year in light of not getting the type of contract that he wants? Now, if the Bengals can re-sign him and give him what he wants and the two sides can work out a deal, great. They can go on happily ever after. But if they can't get that worked out, I think there are enough wide receiver needy teams out there that are waiting to see whether the Bengals would be willing to listen and entertain the idea of a tag and trade for T. Higgins.
Yeah, I mean, those wide receiver needy teams and teams that want to be Super Bowl contenders, you see the teams that have recently won the Super Bowl, they've had essentially two number one receivers, which I think we all agree T. Higgins could be a one depending on the offense. Another thing to point out, in round one, the Bengals pick at 17 overall. They have 6 picks in the upcoming draft. So there is the possibility in a very deep draft that they could make this. Here we stand with all of it. Let's start, Adam, with T. Higgins.
Well, Laura, there were 2 players franchised this year, the fewest number since 1994. T. Higgins was one of the players to get the franchise tag for the second straight year. The Bengals have tagged him to the tune of $26.2 million, which is below what he would be expected to receive on the open market. We'll see if the Bengals can get him signed to a long-term deal. The other team to tag a player was the Kansas City Chiefs, tagging their Pro Bowl guard Trey Smith. They want to get a long-term deal worked out. They're not looking to trade him. We'll see if they can figure out a long-term deal. Both teams that use the tag want to get long-term deals worked out, but it remains questionable as to whether they can. A team that did not use the franchise tag was the Minnesota Vikings, who did not tag their quarterback Sam Darnold, who now has a path to free agency if he wants it. But the Vikings want to try to find a way to re-sign Sam Darnold, keep him in Minnesota where he excelled last year. But the question will be whether there's another team out there that is willing to offer Darnold enough to lure him away from Minnesota. Meanwhile, Osa Odigizua got a 4-year, $80 million deal done today with the Dallas Cowboys before the Cowboys could use their franchise tag on him. The deal included a $40 million signing bonus, of $58 million in guarantees. And unlike some previous years, the Cowboys are active ahead of the start of the new league year, signing Osa Odigizua. And part of that, there you go, Laura, we got it right, finally. And they also restructured the contract of their wide receiver, CD Lamb, today, freeing up another $20 million in cap space, saying that the Dallas Cowboys are effectively all in, trying to make moves, trying to make some things happen ahead of the new league year.
By the way, Adam has to go through like 17 million names, and he nails them all, and occasionally we all get tongue twisted, okay? So I just want to clarify.
Odigizua.
There you go.
Osa Odigizua. I got it, Laura. I got it.
A lot going on. Okay,
Damn.
A lot more news that's going to keep happening, too. But CeeDee Lamb posted this today. Someone was asking him about the restructure that we mentioned. He said, I want to win. It's going to take more than just myself. So interesting to keep an eye on that. He's right. The Cowboys will be looking to get back to their 2023 form this season. Entering the day, the Cowboys had just $2.5 million in cap space, which ranked 25th in the NFL. They lost future Hall of Famer Zach Martin, who retired this offseason, and DeMarcus Lawrence. Rico Dowdle and Eric Kendricks are all free agents. So Dallas will have the 12th pick in this year's draft. And Acho, what do you think of the Cowboys getting this deal done with Odigizua?
I think, unfortunately, from the player side, it's a great deal for the Cowboys. I think they got a discount on Osa Odigizua. Why do I say that? Look at the $80 million 4-year deal. That's $20 million a year. We'll put him right around 15th when it comes to people at his position, defensive linemen. When you look at the guaranteed money, that's usually what I look at when contracts come up. $58 million guaranteed. So you could call that maybe a 3-year, 18 or 19 or so $million deal when you think about just the guaranteed money. I think that's a discount for the Cowboys because Osa Odigizua is going to, I believe, dominate in this Matt Eberflus scheme. And that scheme, this 4-3 defense, the 3 technique, the defensive tackle is a key cog that helps that defense go. And so for me, I think it's a great move, great deal by the Cowboys. I just wish Osa Odigizua would have got a little bit more bread.
Acho, excuse me, Acho. We're all fouled up here. Adam, what's next for the Cowboys?
Well, I think the one that everybody's watching, of course, Laura, is Micah Parsons, which is much easier to pronounce than Osa Odigizua. And Micah Parsons is somebody that Dallas wants to keep long-term. Everybody knows the dominant player that he is. He's a transformational defensive player. Dallas will work to re-sign him during the offseason. We've seen that the bigger deals in Dallas sometimes don't go as quick if we judge by what happened last year with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott waiting until well into the summer and the start of the season before those deals get done. My understanding is at this point in time, the two sides are not close to a deal. Obviously, the Cowboys will want to get a deal done with Micah Parsons, but right now, they're not close to getting that deal in place.
Yeah, and that's why I think you have got to be aggressive with doing the deal or figuring out if it's even possible to get one done with them because there are other issues that the team is going to have. The offensive line has gotten older, and so they're going to have to reinvest in the offensive line through free agency. I think they should probably be involved in the free agent wide receiver market for a veteran at a reasonable price. I think running back is a position of need. Look, that's before you even really start to address the other things on the defensive side of the ball. So, look, I think sometimes when you, when you look at the Cowboys and how they do things, and obviously I mentioned running back because drafting someone like Omari and Hampton or Ashton Gente if he's there, makes sense because you can change kind of the production level of your offense. We were talking about Saquon Barkley earlier in the show. Like the reality is running backs can touch the ball 20, 25 times in a game. You can kind of get the biggest bang for your buck, especially on a guy on a rookie deal. So I just think there are a lot of factors, and obviously the Micah Parsons kind of it all can hold things up.
Yeah, you mentioned Ashton Gente, Omari, and Hampton. There are some super talented running backs in this draft, Tim, to your point. And in Mel's latest mock, he actually had Gente going 6. So it's well said by you that by 12, he may not even be there. The Cowboys, by the way, averaging their fewest rushing yards per game since 2013. Adam, let's get back to you for some more top stories. Let's start with the big news of the day and Saquon Barkley. Speaking of running backs.
Laura, the Philadelphia Eagles have made Saquon Barkley the highest paid running back in NFL history, giving him a 2-year extension on top of the 3-year deal that they gave him within the same calendar deal. It's an unprecedented type of deal in size and scope because you don't see teams redo deals that early. You don't see these types of numbers for a running back, but they knew that Saquon had that kind of year. The Eagles also made another move, releasing their cornerback, James Bradbury. He becomes the second cornerback in 2 days that the Eagles have moved on from, releasing Darius Slay, releasing James Bradbury, freeing up more money against the salary cap. Releasing Slay and Bradbury saves them close to $6.5 million this year against the cap, money that they can use on players like Saquon Barkley. And the New York Jets are releasing their standout wide receiver, Davante Adams, whom they acquired from the Raiders at the trade deadline. A short-lived stint for Davante in New York. He now will go on, become a free agent, able to choose where he wants to go. And the Jets also granted permission to Alan Lazard to seek a trade if he can find one. Jets have some interest in bringing him back. We'll see what they do. And the Rams traded Jonah Jackson, whom they added in free agency last year, to the Chicago Bears for a 6th-round draft pick this year. The Rams are not responsible for any of the money in his contract. The Bears take on the full $17.5 million salary. Chicago was looking to upgrade its offensive line. Many people wondered if they would take a run at Trey Smith, but Kansas City franchised Trey Smith. The Bears then pivot and go and trade a 6th-round draft pick for Jonah Jackson from L.A. Jonah Jackson goes back to the NFC North, where he played in Detroit, and now will be in charge of helping protect Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I love the idea of any extra protection for Caleb Williams at this point. Of course, Ben Johnson taking over as the head coach there. And up next on the show, the Raiders nailed getting Brock Bowers in last year's draft. Can they repeat that formula in April? You don't want to miss what Jordan Reed has to say. His latest mock is coming your way. It's a new mock draft today. 2 rounds, some trade action at the top, which we love. Get excited here, people. Okay, Jordan joining us to take us through all of it. So, what do you have, Jordan, happening with the Titans at 1?
Yeah, so I have the Tennessee Titans actually trading out of the first pick and going to the New York Giants. I have them trading number 34 overall, as well as their 2026 third round pick, I should say, and selecting Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. I think Cam Ward is everything that the Giants need, just because he has the off-script ability that you love to see, and then just the in-the-pocket ability. He has all of that as well. I love the underdog mentality that he plays with as well. The Giants are desperate for a quarterback, so why not pay the price to go up and move up to acquire Cam Ward? I really like his fit there. Next, I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders, number 2 overall, to the Cleveland Browns. This is another team that is desperate for a quarterback. The Deshaun Watson trade obviously did not work out here, but Kevin Stefanski and Shedeur Sanders are a match made in heaven from a schematic standpoint. His ability to play within the pocket, his ball placement, his accuracy, his ability to operate off of play action. But I love the poise, and he is also the toughest quarterback in this year's draft class too. And then the last pick I'm going to talk about is the Tennessee Titans, which they traded back for number 1 overall in exchange with the New York Giants to select Abdul Carter, the edge rusher out of Penn State, who I think is the second best player in this year's draft class behind Travis Hunter of Colorado. But you talk about somebody that is only in their first year playing the position. He absolutely exploded this year. You saw what he was able to do in the college football playoff. I think this is a player that you can eventually build a defense around. You're going to hear the Micah Parsons comparison used a lot for Abdul Carter.
Jordan, I love this. I actually think this makes a ton of sense for the Titans and also the Giants. Adam, what are you hearing about the potential for the Giants moving up for a quarterback like Jordan's telling us about here?
They're going to be interested in moving up to 1, undoubtedly. The real question will be whether the Titans are willing to move back from 1. And they have not reached that decision yet. They still are going through their process. Remember, they hired Mike Borgonzi as the general manager at the start of the offseason. They restructured their front office, and so they're further behind from a scouting standpoint than teams like Cleveland at 2 and the Giants at 3, who didn't go through any front office changes. So they still are going through that. They have to go through their process. They're going to have all the top prospects in Tennessee here in the coming days and weeks to visit with them up close and personal. They'll attend their pro days, and they want to make sure that they do all work possible before deciding whether to use the number 1 overall pick on a player or trading that pick. Look, if they're going to take a quarterback, they're going to stand there. If they want to take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, they can afford to trade back some and get one of those guys and pick up extra picks because I would think that the Giants, maybe the Browns, maybe the Raiders would be only too willing to come up. But the Titans haven't made a decision about whether they're going to sit or move off of one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's why it's critical. If a team is going to move up to one, you've got to be absolutely sure they're not in the quarterback market. Like, you can coach the position well, which I'm sure they do. Then in some regards, it just, like, I don't know where you think your next quarterback's going to be. Now, what I guess we don't know, and Adam alluded to this early in the show, like, how interested would they be in Sam Darnold? I think some of that starts to play into the decision at the top. And I only say that because, like, just a year ago, I don't think there's any shot that the Raiders thought that the draft would come and go without them being able to take a quarterback that they thought could play last year. But it did, and they got left out. And so I just think if you have that happen to you, if you're the Tennessee Titans, then everyone there might be looking for a new job.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's such a unique situation where, to Tim's point, they've got the pressure of their job security on the line, but maybe they don't see every single thing that they want to see there. All right, Adam, let's continue on with a little bit more here on what you're hearing about the Browns at number 2 and what they may do.
I think there continues to be speculation across the league that the Browns, in a perfect world, will go quarterback at 2. Now, the question becomes, if the Titans go quarterback at 1, if there's a team that trades up to get a quarterback at 1, which we certainly think is a realistic possibility here, are the Browns still willing to go quarterback at 2? It's early in the process, but I believe the answer to that could very well be yes. That quarterback goes 1. There's a real possibility that quarterbacks wind up going 1 and 2 in this draft, despite the fact that Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are universally rated as transformational players.
Yeah, it's the ability to get a quarterback, and then you get a quarterback and you have him on a rookie deal, that's got the 5th-year option. You can figure out if he can play. I would just say this on Shedeur Sanders. I think he's a really good quarterback. I think the things that matter probably the most, decision-making, accuracy, and then toughness, he's got all of those things. There is an element, though, that I think you have to have concern about when, there's a guy with physical limitations at the very top of the draft, which is typically reserved for people with outlying physical characteristics to go along with their production and potential.
Yeah, and you also have to take into consideration that the Browns absolutely need a quarterback. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we're talking about Kevin Stefanski and then also Andrew Berry. They have no choice but to win next year. So you're in position to potentially get one of Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. I just don't see how they can pass over a quarterback.
Travis Hunter will be visiting the Browns this week, so we'll keep an eye on that, too. I mean, that's the hard part here. Transformational players at the top of this draft, and Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, as you heard Adam allude to there. But when you need a quarterback, what do you do? All right, still to come on NFL Live. It's been a busy week for wide receivers. Adam's here to talk about who else could be on the move, which teams should be shopping. You don't want to miss it. Free agency just around the corner, and we'll tell you the latest that you can expect. Adam Schefter back with Samuel to the Commanders for a 5th-round pick. Debo, of course, averaged the most yards after the catch among wide receivers last season. Now, the Bengals placed the franchise tag on T. Higgins for the 2nd consecutive season. Higgins had a career-high 10 touchdowns last season, and the Bengals were 8-4 in games where he played. And then the Jets cut 3-time All-Pro Davante Adams today. Adams has 59 receiving touchdowns over his last 5 seasons. That's the most in the NFL. Some other notable wide receivers could be playing elsewhere this coming season. Chris Godwin and Stephon Diggs are both free agents. After both were unable to play more than 8 games due to season-ending injuries, the Rams in the midst of finding a trade partner for Cooper Kupp, and veterans Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins, both free agents, coming off their least productive seasons of their careers. Some big names there, though. Adam, what are you hearing about the interest in Davante Adams now that he's been cut?
Well, here's the interesting part, Laura. He's been cut officially by the New York Jets today. Just a few moments ago, they officially announced his release. He does not have to wait until next week to sign with a team. Davante Adams is now free to sign wherever he wants, whenever he wants. He can get a deal done today. He can get a deal done tomorrow. He doesn't have to wait until next week. His clock on being a free agent now is started, and he can go find a team wherever he would like that to be.
All right, this is pretty fun because we can just kind of play the game right now of matching receivers to ideal teams. So let's do it. Acho, give me a receiver and a team match that you'd be excited about.
I'd love to see Chris Godwin go to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a couple reasons. Number one, Chris Godwin has played a number 2 receiver to Mike Evans, but he's really a number 1, at least he can be. And so you take that number 1 receiver, meaning he had back-to-back 1,000-plus yard receivers. He's a leader in the locker room. I played with him in Tampa Bay. You take that leader, that player, that talent, and you put him in Pittsburgh, a team that needs some help at wide receiver. Number 1, you can have him mentor George Pickens. Number 2, if George Pickens doesn't decide to show up for certain games, at least you have a guy who is going to show up. And so for me, I think Chris Godwin of Pittsburgh is a culture fit, a leadership fit, and a talent fit.
We can fight over Chris Godwin because I'll put him in the Kansas City Chiefs. Look, if the Chiefs have been interested, in the guys that they've been interested in, think about it: Juju Smith-Schuster, Kadarius Toney. You look at DeAndre Hopkins, like the guys that they've been interested. They basically acknowledged it's not worked out with the guys that we've had, so we keep dipping into this veteran receiver market. Well, Chris Godwin, his age, his production, his leadership, all of it. I love it, kind of with any team, but certainly love it with Kansas City. And I would also say this, just to kind of touch on some other guys. Like I think you look at Cooper Kupp and you look at, a place like the Pittsburgh Steelers or even the Denver Broncos, somebody like that, again, to kind of play inside, to move around, to not necessarily be the number 1, but kind of, raise the level of toughness, competitiveness, how you prepare. I think it's important to have guys like that in your wide receiver room, and I think Kupp would add that to a number of different places.
Well, we saw Davante Adams released because the Jets could not find a team that was willing to take on his salary. I think you're going to see a similar situation unfold, barring the unexpected, with the LA Rams. They're going to have a tough time finding a team that's willing to take on the contract of Cooper Kupp right now. They cannot release him till the start of the league year. And so, therefore, Kupp will not have the advantage that Davante Adams does today, where he can go shop for a new team. He's going to have to wait till next week. But clearly, teams are aware of the fact that Cooper Kupp could become available. And just think about this. Last weekend, we saw the 49ers trade Deebo Samuel. Today, we saw the Jets release Davante Adams. Cooper Kupp could be coming up here as well. And so the wide receiver free agent market is constantly evolving.
And Kupp may not have the advantage that Davante Adams has, but he will have the market, even probably a bigger market than Davante Adams. The reason why is, number 1, you have a guy who's a Triple Crown winner at receiver. But number 2, culture matters so much, especially with some of these young receivers. They need to learn how to play the game. Cooper Kupp's a guy that when Matthew Stafford showed up, he was in his ear. He was showing up. All those little things that you need to build culture, he has it.
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, as well as